And primarily it's because we don't understand the difference between what happens when a person gets two X chromosomes and when a person has an X and a Y chromosome. And what I'm trying to say is that men and women approach sex differently, they think about sex differently, and the outcome of conversations about sex end up being very different, and which can cause arguments and breakups. And so I think this is really important. And the reason why I'm doing this is that a cancer patient asked me, hey, if I take this progesterone, will it help my libido? And I said, look, it should, because progesterone helps you to relax. And we're going to talk about that. But I told her, I said, look, men have sex so they can relax, and women have to be relaxed in order to want to have sex. So, see, that's where the problem goes and where the problem lies. The men, if they have a stressful day, and if they come home and their wife sees that he's stressed out, she can say, "Come on, big boy, let's go upstairs and let's take care of you." And they have sex, and afterwards he's relaxed, he could fall asleep, he doesn't care about what happened during that day. The birds are singing sweeter, the meal tastes better, everything is better. Now, when a woman is stressed, she can't relax, okay? But she has to be relaxed in order to want to have sex. But the problem is, men think women are like them. So a man comes home and his wife is complaining about the kids and how the dinner was burnt and how the contractor came and messed up her yard and all these things. And he says, all right, baby, come on, I'm gonna make you feel better. He starts rubbing on, and she wants to hit him over the head with a frying pan because she's like, get away from me. Can't you see I'm stressed? I don't want to have sex right now. So then he goes off and pouts and he's upset. And now we've got a problem. Now, I'm going to tell you that happens more than you think. And I'll tell you, it used to happen to me before I began to understand my wife and understand women. Now, you have to understand, I was an OBGYN for 15, 16 years before I started doing holistic medicine. So all I talked to was women. So I won't say I know how women think, that no man knows that, but I feel like I've heard a lot of the complaints from women, and that's the problem. They are not interested in sex when they are stressed. So let's try and understand this. I'm a scientist and I'm a spiritual MD, so I'm going to talk about both of those. How science and physiology and hormones, all of that create this system where men and women look at sex differently. All right. So let's go to the first slide. So why men want sex when they're stressed and women don't? I just kind of explained it to you, but we're going to go a little bit deeper. So by understanding the biological foundations of intimate relationships, we can transform how we connect. In this presentation, we're going to explore the fascinating hormone differences that drive men and women contrasting response to stress, and how these differences impact desire and intimacy. And this is what I tell people all the time. Men are men and women are women. And that's how it's going to be. And I tell men, hey, if you don't like what your wife is doing, then you're going to have to marry a man. If you want her to act like you're going to have to marry a man, because women are going to behave like women. All right. Because they have certain innate things that are in them in order to keep civilization going. Okay. Somebody has to be a nurturer. Somebody has to be the active person who goes out and provides. And this is how life is. This is how nature is. If you look at the animal kingdom, uh, male animals and female animals have different roles. When we went to Africa, Kenya, and Tanzania like 10 or 12 years ago, and the lions, the male, they are one of the protectors, and the women go out and hunt. So different animals may change those roles, but different sexes in all nature, they have different roles. All right. Let's go to the next slide. I think I control it. All right. So what we're going to learn today is the biological differences, how stress affects male and female libido differently through hormonal pathways, hormonal interactions, the critical roles of testosterone, progesterone, and cortisol in sexual desire. And that's all I talk about is how hormones, they affect everything, and especially cortisol. The stress connection is definitely in play right here. So relationship impact, why hormonal misunderstandings create conflict, and how to restore the connection. Because I will tell you, why do men cheat? Why do women stay home and they take care of the children most of the time? And they can live without a man. Okay, they can live without a man. There's you see all these single mothers around who survive and thrive, and their kids do well. And men can do that, but they're not open enough to do it, because both male and females, they have what we call divine masculine and divine feminine qualities. So that's why, if a wife dies, a man can take on the role of a nurturer. It's not what has been developed in a man, because early on we tell men this is what men do and this is what women do. But men and women have these same, what we call divine energies, this active energy, which is male, and then this nurturing, quiet energy that is called the feminine, the divine feminine. So by understanding these biological differences and these spiritual differences, couples can move from frustration to compassion and develop strategies that work with and not against their hormonal realities. So if it's all about understanding. I mean, that's what marriage is about, is understanding the person and the differences in that person, and how those differences can actually enhance a relationship and not cause conflict. The song by John Legend, he's talking about, I love your perfect imperfections. And he thinks it's an imperfection. The person is saying, this is just who I am. But you have to love what you think are the perfect imperfections in your mate. All right, so let's go to this one. All right, so in a male libido under stress, now I showed you like this hormonal pathway. Now, when men are under stress, testosterone doesn't go toward cortisol. Now, progesterone does. Cortisol steals progesterone away, and it's a whole chemical form. It's a whole chemical pathway that shows this. But the funny thing is that when men are under stress, cortisol doesn't necessarily steal testosterone, but cortisol can cause a problem, but usually it doesn't. But unlike female hormones, male testosterone levels don't immediately drop during short-term stress periods. Now, if it's long-term, testosterone can drop, and I'll talk about that, I think, a little bit later. So when you have this testosterone, it's spiritual. It's like fire. Okay, men have this energy that's considered to be active, or it's like fire. And again, when you look at these ancient philosophies, they looked at men like the sun and women like the moon, because women had these cycles and men were like fire. They wanted to go out and be active and do something and create something. So how do you put out fire? It has to go to water, and women are like water. So let me tell you, I'm gonna get into some of this, because this is called Ageless Blueprint, and I went to Egypt to learn these ancient philosophies. So what they look at is that women are like water. Okay, they cool the fire, and so that's what you got to think, is that men have stress and they want to go and be cooled off with water. And so that's what happened. But the water has to be still and calm. You don't want to be cooled off by a hurricane. Okay, you don't want to be cooled off by a hurricane. You want the water to be still and quiet. And a woman has to feel like that in order to accept and cool off the fire. Okay, that sounds deep, but it's really beautiful. All right, so sexual activity triggers dopamine and oxytocin release. And dopamine is what gives you pleasure, and oxytocin makes you want to be close to someone. And that counteracts the cortisol effects. So the man is looking to be cooled off. He wants to feel some relief. He wants to be close to you, but he's looking for sex to bring that closeness. All right. With women, it's the other way around. They have to be close in order to want to have sex. They have to feel the oxytocin first. They have to feel the dopamine first before they want to have sex. And men, they have sex so they can feel the dopamine and they can feel the oxytocin. And so for men, it is a psychological escape. And sex provides both mental distraction so they can forget about the problems that they had at work or with with whoever, and the emotional release from stressful situations. So again, a man can have an awful day, and women, you know this. And if you allow them to have sex with you, they forget about everything. If you want to stop an argument with a man, just tell him, "Come on, baby, I'll make it up to you. Let's go upstairs and let's see what happens." And he just immediately, just thinking about it, he gets a smile on his face, because men are very visual. They can imagine, a sexual scene, and their body will respond to it. If you don't think that your body responds to your thoughts, ask a man if he thinks about sex, does his body respond in a certain way? And I think you know what I mean when you're talking about response. And just like a woman, if her thoughts will control her physiologic response, okay, whether she becomes moist and excited or whatever. It can be by the thought of feeling close to the man, all right, to her spouse or to her sexual partner. All right, the female libido under stress. Cortisol blocks progesterone. In one of the other videos, I showed you the hormonal pathway, how hormones originate from cholesterol, and then it goes down this pathway. But when stress is involved, it takes a left turn, and instead of making progesterone, it makes cortisol. Okay, so now her progesterone is down. Now, why is that important? Because stress hormones directly inhibit progesterone production, creating this hormonal imbalance. The nervous system shifts because progesterone is a calming, relaxing hormone. That's why when you don't have enough of it, the 2 weeks before your period, you get anxious and depressed. So the body automatically enters this fight or flight mode, prioritizing survival over reproduction.